All right, what up, team? So we just had the live stream for Path of Exile 2, the third edict, which is the patch preview for 0.3 that's coming out on August 29th. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I think it was absolutely a turbo fucking banger. Just out the gate, we didn't get any new classes or ascendancies, which does suck, but I'll get in that a little bit later because I do think they have some good reasoning for it. But overall, I think it was actually a phenomenal live stream. They did a ton of good changes, a lot of really good work, and I think point 3 is actually going to be fantastic. To give a quick summary of 0.3, it's more or less going to be a patch that is cleaning up a lot of the weaker areas of the game that desperately needed it while adding in some other things. And I think if we look at 0.2, one of the big problems of 0.2 was really skill balance and ascendancy balance. A lot of the ascendancies felt really bad, especially after some of the nerfs. A lot of the skills felt absolutely horrendous, and it really was like a 3 skill patch. And I think that's why a lot of people really didn't like 0.2. There were other reasons, of course, but I think that 0.3 aims to fix a lot of that. And just to give like some general examples, they buffed all of the classes. They assumingly buffed all the skills. We'll have to see in the patch notes. They added in a bunch of new supports, legendary supports. They removed the support gem restriction. There's just a lot of good things that are there for helping make new characters and helping build diversity and build viability, which I really think is the core of the game and probably the most important thing to address. To start off with the elephant in the room, there are no new classes and there are no new ascendancies for patch 0.3. And while that is a bit disappointing to hear initially, I think once you take into account all of the things that are coming in 0.3, I think it's okay. And I think there's actually a ton of really good things they did in 0.3. And as far as good of a patch as you could have gotten, absent a new class or new ascendancy, I think 0.3 is very close to that. So overall, I am very pleased. And I think that there will be plenty of diversity and new things to try and go through in 0.3, absent of a new class or ascendancy. Talking a bit more about the changes that support build diversity, of course, we have all the support gems that are coming in, the support changes, and that sort of thing. The removal of the support gem restriction, which will obviously be huge. There's 12 new skills, and there also is reworks of some old skills, which I think will help a ton. They also address one of the problems with elemental damage, which is resistance building. And, one of the issues of building tri-LE damage is that you have to have someone to get LE pen for all 3 elements. Usually going crit and a beacon of Aziz is the go-to fix for that. They added in Curse of Elements, and then they now did it so your Frostbomb has elemental exposure. They added in a lot of good support for that, which I think is pretty nice. And they added in a bunch of other things for tri-LE stuff as well, which I think will be very fun to mess around with and see how good it actually is. On top of this, they said they buffed everything, so all the classes got buffed. I'm assuming all the weaker skills got buffed. I think just having the support gem changes alone will make a lot of the skills just infinitely better as they work with one another more cohesively. We have some known buffs they showed for the ascendancies. I think Blood Mage is going to be absolutely nuts. They made it so that the first 2 points of Blood Mage, I believe Sanguimancy is what it's called, no longer costs ascendancy points. So that means you will get 2 extra ascendancy points on Blood Mage now, which is a massive change, and I think it needed to happen forever ago, and I think it's dope. They did show some changes to Kaeula Monk. I'm not gonna lie, it still kind of looks like dog shit. We'll just have to see. They also added in things like Hollow Palm, which looks really cool. I'll probably will be making a Hollow Palm Monk. It does look sick as fuck, I'm not gonna lie. And then another huge one for build changing is they added in Timeless Jewels. For those of you who don't know, a Timeless Jewel, essentially what it will do, well, there's different versions of it, but this variant, what it will do is you put in a jewel socket, and in a large radius or a very, whatever the actual radius size is around that jewel socket, it converts all of the notables and all of the small passive notables to something else. These can be really good for making a build really strong, for squeezing out some extra power. I think these will help a ton in terms of the build diversity as well. They made some defensive changes as well. So now you have a new layer for evasion stackers, which is deflection. It essentially is just 40% damage mitigation, assuming you pass the deflection check. I believe you have to build it similar to evasion. I think that the game needed more defensive buffs, so I'm a big proponent of that. Another big change they added in was LE to armor, depending on how that's converted, although I do think the values are rather large. We'll just have to see. Which brings me to another big thing, is they just did a bunch of passive tree reworks. There's a ton of new notables. There's a ton of new keystones. One of the new keystones they showed converts all of your fire damage to chaos and causes chaos to ignite. I think shit like that is super cool, especially if you want to do like a fireball build. Another big change that I thought was awesome was that for the Infernalist, the demon form shapeshift, you no longer lose your main hand weapon, which is huge. That was one of the major issues. There's a huge reason why people didn't use it. So again, I think that there are just so many really positive changes in this, just in regards to character balance alone, that I think it will make up for the fact very well that we don't have a new class or ascendancy. There were also a bunch of major major improvements to crafting that I think will really help the health of the game. So they added in another tier of essences and they reworked how essences work. Now what they do is if you have a magic item or a blue item, it will change it to a rare item and it will add the specified mod on the essence. This is extremely useful. I believe this is how greater essences work, but instead of it being of a specific type, it will be whatever the mod is on the essence itself. They then added in a third essence, which will act as a chaos orb in the sense that it will remove a mod and add in whatever the mod is on the essence. I think this is good for deterministic crafting. Crafting needed to be less random. They also added in a bunch of extra omens, which will help with this. One of the omens is like this diviner's omen, so it'll allow you to divine an item, and then it'll roll the range with potentially a 0.8 to 1.2 modifier, I believe with the numbers they gave. So you can actually divine items with this omen to an even higher range to get a super GG item, and it'll become sanctified, which is similar to corruption. You cannot craft on a sanctified item. Again, I think that is a good change. We do need divine sinks as well. On top of this, they added different tiers of the crafting orbs. The base crafting orbs will function as they did before, but now the greater versions and the better versions, I think there's greater and perfect, they will now add a minimum tier of the mod. So this way you will not get some GG ass item that has all these great stats and then add fucking 1 mana on kill or whatever it was. That was a huge problem, and it was one of the worst parts about exalting items. Like, it was like classic, I'm gonna exalt this twice, delete it on cursor, and get really pissed off. That was like a standard gameplay loop for a lot of people. A concern about this that was brought up by one of the boys on stream was maybe this might be adding too much bloat to the game, and I think it's good to be cautious of things like this. But I think PoE 2 actually could use a little bit of bloat to help again with the agency of crafting and to make it a bit more deterministic and not so random, like just toxic as fuck for no reason. So I do agree that we should be careful about adding bloat, but I think in this case it's probably fine to throw it in. The new mechanic for 0.3 will be Abyss, and it does look very similar to Abyss in PoE 1. You'll follow it around, do the troves, every now and then you get an Abyssal Death, and then fight an Abyss boss. They also incorporated Betrayal with Abyss, so now we will get unveils via Abyss. It'll drop little currencies that will allow you just add a modifier that's veiled, which actually is kind of cool. It doesn't like remove or roll the item, it just simply adds a modifier, at least from what they showed in the actual showcase itself. So this seems like it'll be an extremely powerful crafting tool. And just kind of off the top of my head, you know, if you got a base with 2 good mods, you could essence it with a third mod, and then you could veiled mod. And so now you have 4 mods that you're controlling for, or that are somewhat deterministic, far more so than they used to be. And then, yeah, with perfect exalts, it seems pretty reasonable that crafting will probably be very strong this patch, I'm assuming. And especially with how the omens might be, they again might be way too rare and extremely valuable. In which case, you know, thank God, boys, ritual is in. Of course, saving one of the biggest changes for last that I am probably the most excited about is the shift to how they're changing trade. So trade will now function as you'll have like a merchant shop or a merchant tab. It'll be your shop. You'll put items in there that you want to sell. You will list them for a price, and then players, absent your interaction, so whether you're offline, there, farming, whatever it is you're doing, they'll be able to come in to your hideout. They'll teleport to your shop. They'll be able to purchase the item, and then they'll see all the other items that you have available. You can of course have multiple tabs for this. They mentioned about like converting some of your premium tabs to merchant tabs, so you can have a larger merchant shop if you want. Overall, I think this is a fantastic change for trade. I used to be one of those people that was all about, you know, I was on the side of trade should be something that is in between players. You guys should have to communicate with one another, and it's supposed to be social, blah, blah, blah. But I think that realistically, every single iteration of trade that we have created that has been to make it better and more convenient has always been to undermine that. And I think that's okay. And I think it's time to let go of that and swap over, strictly because it just solves so many problems. If you have this merchant shop, people can't price fix. If you have this merchant shop and you're looking to buy like multiple, let's say maps or something, or I think of like veiled items like you would in PoE 1, if you go to the merchant shop and you see 5 items that have all the veils that you need, you can just buy those 5 items even though you were only coming for the one that was listed. There's just a ton of perks to this, and I do think that this will overall be one of the biggest changes to PoE 2, and they did say it will be going to PoE 1. We'll still have the old trade system. It'll be there for, I don't know how long, maybe they'll keep it forever or it'll be temporary. It makes sense they want to keep it around because there's some people that still want to use the legacy system, and then the new system might have problems or it might go down or not work, that sort of thing. Overall, this is one of like the hypest changes I have ever felt for PoE in a very long time, maybe since like 3.25 with the removal of totems for melee. Like, I think this is just going to be so massive. And of course, there will be drawbacks to it, and there are going to be some negatives, but overall, it's going to solve so many trade woes that I think it'll be more than worth it. It pretty much covers the vast majority of the core changes to the game. There are some other things, like now when you access bosses for the Pinnacle content, you'll have splinters in like stacks of 300. If you're doing the easy version, it's like only 50 splinters. If you're doing the hardest version, it's like 100 100 or 200, whatever, which is also a very good change. Don't get me wrong. There are also some changes to how the Pinnacle content works and getting to the Arbiter of Ass. So a lot of that stuff, again, is very good as well. There's a lot of other things I didn't cover that are pretty small, but again, I think they will be noticeable and they'll feel really good. One of the major things that I wanted to point out and kind of talk about 0.3 as in what it means for the direction of PoE 2 and is it a good omen or a good sign or whatever. One of the changes that they made was something I bitched about a ton, which was the way they did the mods on maps. So in PoE 1, how it worked was that as you added more mods to a map, the map got harder, but the rewards of the map increased. They removed that in PoE 2, and it was prefixes are what gave you rewards on a map, and suffixes just made the map harder. They went back to the PoE 1 system, and they said in the actual reveal that they wanted to try something different with PoE 2, but they realized that their system or version of it in PoE 1 was just simply better. And I think that that was not only true, but I think that this is an awesome realization to hear them kind of say out loud, because it is recognizing the fact that there was just a lot of things that PoE 1 did well. And I think that them moving in that direction is nothing but a good sign. And of course, don't get me wrong, I don't want them to be the same game. I want PoE 2 to be its own thing, to do things separately. But I do think there were just some things that PoE 1 solved. And I love to see that they are looking back and acknowledging that. One last thing I will mention in 0.3, which is a big one that they did talk about in the Q&A but wasn't in the reveal, is they talked about the changes to towers. Unfortunately, there are no changes to towers coming in 0.3, which I do think does suck. However, in the Q&A, we did get some nice, what I think is reassurance of the direction of the game, to know that we are going in the right path, to know that the problems are at least acknowledged. I mentioned this in one of my other videos a while ago, but Jonathan in the Q&A, he pretty much perfectly explained the exact issue with towers, why they're problematic, and it felt like they understood that, and it felt like they lamented that they couldn't do something about it in 0.3, which I think we all feel the same way. But again, it's just a good thing to hear him say the exact problem, to understand that it is a problem. It definitely gives me, hope in time. Like, okay, that's fine. Like, I get it. We couldn't do it now. You did a ton of other great work. It would have been nice to get towers, but sometimes you don't get everything that you want. But overall, I think that this is just a good omen, a good sign for the health of the game and the direction that it's headed. One of the things I always said is, we're going to need 2 points on a line. We saw how 0.2 went. We need to see how 0.3 is going to go. And I think overall, 0.3 is defining a very good direction for the game in general. That will be all for me for this video. I will see you guys in the next one. We have the patch notes. I believe they're out today. I'll do a video on those tomorrow, and then I'll probably do some theory crafting streams and come up with some potential league starter theory craft next week for the actual launch of 0.3. But until then, I will see you guys later. Deuces.